A very good evening to you all. As chair of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening and those friends who are attending via live media. Our annual Matti Egon lecture is always a very special event, as it commemorates the legacy of our founder, a truly remarkable lady, inspiring, kind and generous, supportive of those in need and a dedicated patron of classics. Thanks to Matti, leading British academics embraced her vision by becoming patrons of Gakuk. This evening, however, I'm in a sad position to announce the loss of two dear patrons, two figureheads of Greek archaeology, Sir John Boardman, a preeminent scholar and a leading authority on Greek art, and very recently, Professor Lord Ramshaw, a pioneer in deciphering the socioeconomic patterns of prehistoric civilizations, especially in the Aegean Islands. Their contributions profoundly shaped Greek archaeology. They will both be greatly missed. Before we commence the lecture, let us start the evening with a very short video presenting Gakuk's activities and mission, set by the late Matti Egon, a truly admirable woman.
Welcome to the Greek Archaeological Committee UK annual Matti Egon lecture. The Greek Archaeological Committee, founded in 1986 by Matti Egon Xylas, is a British registered charity which promotes Greek archaeology in the UK and grants scholarships to Greek and Cypriot Greek first-class graduates of limited means to pursue postgraduate studies in leading UK universities. Each year, this lecture serves as a tribute to the memory of our founder, who was a source of inspiration and encouragement to all. Her philanthropy and generosity touched many lives. Her legacy continues to live on through the charity's scholarship fund and the past scholars who advanced Greek archaeology across the world. To date, the Greek Archaeological Committee has granted 79 scholarships and delivered 68 public lectures. These scholarships are only possible through annual memberships and donations from individuals and institutions, 100% of which go towards the university fees of young, promising archaeologists, thus helping them fulfill their dreams. Support the Greek Archaeological Committee and help keep classical studies alive in the UK.
On behalf of Gakuk, I would like to express my gratitude to our donors, as without their help, our mission would not be possible. A big thank you goes to Stamatia Komninos. We're glad she's present here this evening, and Nikomninos, Matti's children, and Gakuk's major donors, who gracefully continue her legacy, sponsor the Matti Egon Scholarship, and constantly support us in keeping their mother's vision alive. This year, the Matti Egon Scholarship was awarded to Anna Maria Nasiakou and Theodore Mazis. These are our new scholars.
Hello, my name is Anna Maria Nasiakou, and I am a student in the Master of Science in Egon University.
Hello, my name is Theodore Mazis. I'm a second-year Ph.D. student at the University of Oxford in Worcester.
Thank you. We would also like to thank the A.G. Levendis Foundation for its continuous support over the years by granting an annual scholarship. The recipient this year is Maria Papandonopoulou.
Thank you. And I study a Master's of Science at Durham University. Thank you very much.
The J.F. Kostopoulos Foundation grant this year was awarded to Myrto Kokalya.
And I am a fourth year PhD student at the University of Peloponnese.
Last but not least, our Gakuk Member Scholarship, funded by their annual subscription, was awarded to Maria Theodora Zelli.
I'm a fourth year PhD student at Argolid and Corinthia.
And now let's turn our attention to the main event of the evening. It is a great pleasure to host Dr. Demetrios Athanasoulis, Director of the Ephorate of Antiquities of the Cyclades and the Dodecanese, a distinguished archaeologist who, despite his myriad obligations, including currently preparing an exhibition which is very soon opening in Athens, he has managed to join us in London for this evening. After having read history and archaeology at the University of Thessaloniki, he continued his graduate studies in Université Panthéon-Sorbonne and was awarded his Ph.D. in Byzantine archaeology from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. He served as curator of the Byzantine monuments of Elis, as director of Byzantine Antiquities of Arcadia, Argolid and Corinthia, as well as member of the board of the European Center of Byzantine and Post-Byzantine monuments. He's contributing to the field of archaeology by undertaking large-scale European programs for the enhancement of monuments, digital applications, and research, as well as dozens of restoration projects of Byzantine churches. In parallel, Dr. Athanasoulis has conducted extensive fieldwork in the Peloponnese and the Cyclades, has established new archaeological museums, for example, the Byzantine Museum in Argos, the Thematic Museum of Crusaders in Hellenic Castle, and others, and completed the renovations of the archaeological museums of Mykonos and Delos. His meticulous restoration work on the iconoclastic Byzantine frescoes in the 18th century, century, Church of Hagia Kyriaki of Naxos in 2018, and the restoration of the Episcopi of Sikinos, a Roman mausoleum converted into a Byzantine church in 2022, resulted in 2 Europa Nostra awards. A talented archaeologist, Dr. Athanasoulis, will now take us on a journey to a small Cycladic island and unravel the mysteries of the Roman mausoleum. Thank you. Dr. Athanasoulis.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to thank the Greek Archaeological Committee in the UK and personally Dr. Rosetta Theodoropoulos Polychroniadis for the invitation to give this annual Matti Egon lecture. I will try, as Zeta said, to take you from London to Sikinos, this tiny island in the middle of the Aegean Sea. And there I will share with you the fascinating story of the monument of Episcopi. Episcopi is a small remote island in the middle of the Aegean Sea, and although it belongs to the Cyclades, one of the most touristic destinations in Europe, Sikinos has so far preserved its unique character from touristic overdevelopment. Access to this beautiful island is difficult, requiring a 12-hour boat journey. Despite being one of the smaller islands of the archipelago, Sikinos has been inhabited since prehistoric times. The absence of suitable bays for shipping seems to have ensured that Sikinos was not one of the main maritime trade routes, and so forced it to turn to its barren land to survive. The humble character of the island is early documented in the relevant report by the Athenian Solo. The Byzantine Empire showed a concern for the Aegean Islands as they were a vital area for its survival, especially during the era of the Arab Jihad in the 7th and 8th centuries. The Byzantine Empire showed and after the fall of Constantinople to the Crusaders in 1204, Cycnos became part of an autonomous island hegemony known as the Venetian Duchy of Naxos. Though references pertaining to the Byzantine era are far and few between, the archaeological evidence as well as the numerous churches of Cycnos do identify significant periods of prosperity. The first, during the Latin period from the 13th to 15th centuries, and the second during the 17th century. In an unspoiled, typically Cycladic landscape, stands tall the ancient monument of Episcopi. The building, part of an abandoned monastic complex, is located in the necropolis of the ancient city of the island, which spread over the adjacent hill of Agia Marina. Episcopi, created at the turn of the late antiquity, seems to have always been treated by the inhabitants of Cycnos with respect, retaining much of its original form. When we began its restoration, the monument had been inaccessible for more than a half a century due to fear of collapse. The project, financed by European Regional Development Fund, the region of South Aegean, and executed by the Ephorate of Antiquities of the Cyclades, focused on the preservation of the monument's authenticity. All stages of its history were treated equally. Anastylosis was kept to the necessary minimum so that the original form remained discernible, but without disrupting or eliminating the later phases. The knowledge gained is one of the strongest outcomes achieved in the work at the Episcopi. Among other finds, our research has yielded a significant set of inscriptions from the Archaic period to Roman times, valuable witnesses for a place seldom mentioned in the written sources. Careful study also unveiled many hidden features regarding the intriguing monument's history and identity. The examination of the building, as well as a thorough study of the scattered architectural elements, allowed us to reconstruct its ancient form and to decipher its successive metamorphoses during its use as a Byzantine church. These interventions did not alter its original form, but, on the contrary, the Christian modifications were adapted to it. Around the year 200 AD, Episcopi was erected as a Hieron, at a size disproportionate to that of the island. It was in the type of a D-style in Antis temple with pediments. It was built on a high podium with a staircase to allow access from the west side. Two barrel-vaulted underground crypts were arranged, to which narrow, flat-roofed passages led from the south. The ancient building, apart from its eastern facade, survives nearly intact up to the height of the limestone entablature, as well as the beginning of the pediments at their corner. Its cellar was originally covered with a barrel vault that collapsed during the Middle Ages. The architecture of the monument is eclectic, combining elements of the Ionic and Doric orders. The architecture, we can see here part of the Roman phase of the monument. The ancient edifice mixes various construction techniques. The curved architectural members of the facade and entablature are assembled using metal clamps. The walls are built with rough-hewn stones using a clay-based mortar as a binding agent. The cella of Episcopi was plastered and carried painted decoration found in the conservation works. Floral motifs on white background were topped with a frieze of polychrome meander that circled the upper level of the walls. In the crypts, burials looted in antiquity were found, but in the cella above, where sarcophagi or urns probably once existed, nothing remains, since the area was converted into a church. The Heron of Sikinos followed the imperial period typology of monumental funerary architecture. In the heroization of the dead then pursued, the process employed the religious architecture with temple-formed tombs as a model. This approach had the purpose of both preserving the memory and making their place of burial. During the imperial period, the Greeks of the Cyclades built large funerary monuments on the crypt tomb temple type. Above underground chambers, they included a cella preceded by a pronaos. This type of monument is present in Greece and especially in Asia Minor. The individual elements of the Episcopi architectural decoration connected with Anatolian parallels. In the Asia Minor Hiroa, the burials of the prominent deceased are placed in the cella, inside sarcophagi or urns, while more distant relatives or even slaves are buried in the crypts. The architects of the temple-type tombs on the islands were also inspired by local Hellenistic traditions. Roman temple-type tombs can be also found in neighboring Santorini, with the most characteristic example being the Heron known as Evangelismos, from the church that later occupied part of it. Half statues collected from the surrounding area of Episcopi might have come from our funerary monument. This is a statuary type particularly popular in the Roman burials of the southern Cyclades on islands such as Santorini, Milos, Folegandros, and Anafi. There, the tradition of the use of half statues is already attested in the Hellenistic period. Although the monument had already been looted in antiquity, during the restoration works, an unplundered burial was revealed. Having noticed that there was a blind spot in the northeast corner of the basement, investigation focused on this point. After the removal of the Roman-era floor slabs, it was found that above the blind spot, the eastern part of the northern vault of the crypt had been demolished and ultimately filled with rubble and mortar. The removal of this filling revealed the covering slabs of the tomb, which is effectively encased in, and therefore contemporary with, the solid masonry that filled the northeastern corner of the building. The tomb was formed with stone slate slabs for its floor and with one-piece side walls of marble. This is a case of burial where the typical placement of the honored deceased in the crypts or in the chamber is not followed, but instead an intermediate position is chosen between the two levels. The literal walling up of the burial, and thus the disappearance of every trace of it, could be perceived as an extreme precautionary measure against grave robbers, who would certainly be attracted by the ornate heron. However, there are other elements that together lead to a different interpretation for taking these extreme sealing away measures. This is a short video on the investigation of the burial. The deceased, a woman who, according to the osteological examination, died at the age of 35 to 40 years and was about 1.5 meters tall, was found carefully placed in a supine position with her hands behind and below the pelvis. Parts of the fabrics with which the deceased body was certainly wrapped have been preserved. Pieces of gilded leather, cork, and straw come from her footwear. The gold jewelry she wore is impressive, an indication that she was a woman of high status. Her gold earrings were a popular Roman type, worn by securing them tightly on the earlobe. A gold necklace made up of loops and teardrop-shaped elements was placed open at the height of her neck, above the clothes that covered her torso. On her right shoulder was found a gold brooch. It is decorated at its border with teardrop-shaped cells that enclose green glass paste. In the center is applied a stone cameo in relief, possibly onyx, depicting a winged female figure as a bust, a Nike perhaps. It is an outstanding example of small-scale sculptural art. She wears a chiton that leaves her left shoulder and left breast bare. Her long wavy hair is combed into an elaborate headdress. A pair of bracelets adorned her arms. 3 rings were found on the fingers of the deceased. The first with an engraved representation of 3 figures in an abstract rendering. The ring shows extensive wear that betrays many years of use. And the second ring, the stone of its bezel, is missing. The third ring consists of 2 joint rings. The burial was accompanied by offerings near the feet of the deceased, including a bronze mirror, a lead vessel, and fragments of small glass vases. Also included 2 animal bone needles and a bone distaff. The last belongs to the type of finger distaffs whose small shape and decorative character seem to place it in the category intended for funerary use. The distaff is a weaving tool associated with women's everyday life throughout time and as a symbol of virtue, constitute a typical offering of female burials. The examination of the organic remains found scattered on the torso of the deceased and consisting mainly of small masses of fabrics, usually of more than 1 layer, has confirmed the presence of abundant grains of natural resin that indicate embalming. The use of natural resins, which is associated with the mummification process of the dead that was applied in Egypt, was maintained as a burial practice during the Roman period, as their antimicrobial and antifungal properties were known. The results from the study of the skeletal material are particularly illuminating for the interpretation of the burial as deviant, that is to say, not conducted according to normal customs. The woman had suffered a crushing blow to the mouth, while her femurs were also found broken. The unnatural position of the ankles indicates that the deceased most likely had had her feet bound. Therefore, the burial, at least ostensibly, testifies to extreme and violent measures had been taken to immobilize the body and make it unusable. The search for the motivation for this deviant burial ritual is by way of a complex spectrum of social and religious beliefs. The usual groups that may be excluded from the regular burial ceremony based on the information we have from written sources, but also from archaeological data. Include those who died young, those killed in a battle, those who died violently, victims of murder and abuse, suicides, people with disabilities, and slaves. In these cases, the burial practice used expresses either the superstition of the society about the possible anger of the dead towards the living, or simply the common feeling about the need to insult and degrade them. In the burial of Sikinos, an illuminating element of the search, in the search for interpretation, is the identification of two unusual objects, specifically on the chest of the deceased. On the chest of the deceased, a lump of bitumen was found on her left breast and one of sulfur on her right. In antiquity, these two materials had various applications, including their use for disinfection and purification, but they were also used as medicines. However, given their placement here on a dead body, another explanation is linked to the world of magic. A magical papyrus from Egypt, known as the Leiden Papyrus J395, is a primary source of the 4th century AD. It contains a magical text with a long ritual section and a prayer of Moses to the moon goddess Selene, in which the following is preserved. If someone is possessed, say the name of the demon possessing them and hold sulfur and bitumen under their nose. He shall speak and be released. Thus, the placement of these two magical materials on the chest under the head of the deceased makes the possibility particularly strong that the deceased had suffered at the hands of her superstitious relatives. The extreme measures that had been taken to immobilize and isolate her, being taken, tight fit, hands trapped under the body, broken legs, broken mouth, immuring of the grave, make it possible that the unfortunate woman suffered from an illness, perhaps one with epileptic characteristics or something similar, which would have led her contemporaries to the conclusion that appropriate measures out of fear of the deceased had to be taken. As well as the special configuration of the architecture of the monument to accommodate her burial, implemented before the completion of the construction, since the Roman floor also covered the inserted tomb, the rich deviant burial connects the heroine with the person in it. It is therefore reasonable to argue that the fragmentarily preserved epigram on the southern door pillar of the entrance to the cella, which enthusiastically praises a woman whose name is not preserved, refers to the deceased on the hidden tomb. According to the epigram, she had the form of the goddess Hera and the wisdom of Athena, and the gods have called her to share eternal life with the great women of the past. A second versified funerary epigram, revealed after the removal of newer plasters on the north wall, fills in many of the gaps in our story. The inscription was roughly engraved on the surface of a semi-work stone and was not intended to be visible, as the walls were originally covered with plaster and frescoed. The funerary epigram consists of two elegiac couplets. Buried here lies the beautiful body of beloved Nico, and her soul is with the immortals, for the immortals wish that the souls who lived sagaciously are the ones that do not die. The epigram reveals the name of a woman who was buried in the funerary monument and bore the rare Greek name Nico. The paleographic analysis, as well as the content of the inscription, could place the burial in the 3rd century AD. Worthy of comment is the partial similarity of this epigram with the epigram of the door. The rough engraving even bears some changes, such as the word imertis, that is beloved, desired, being corrected to imartis, that is of fate. Both epigrams confirm that the dead woman is heroized, a honor which is also bestowed on women, as we know from neighboring Santorini, where private heroization of the deceased was popular. Women are honored as heroines for their sophrosini, wisdom, which defines them as much as their beauty. The heroization of the deceased is well attested in the Hellenistic period on the coast of Asia Minor and the nearby islands, regions with which the Cyclades had both political and economical contacts. The practice remained popular during the Roman era. Moreover, imperial policy favored the rise to power of wealthy local families who formed veritable dynasties. This wealthy elite was keen to demonstrate its loyalty to Greek culture, its interest for the arts, as it betrayed by the funerary inscriptions, the half statues, and the heroa with which they honored their dead. The construction of impressive funerary monuments, the use of poetry in the epigrams, and the qualities of the funerary statuary confirm that the islanders took full advantage of the peace in the Aegean Sea throughout the imperial period until the second half of the 3rd century AD. This is the context in which the Hieron of Sikinos was built for Niko, a woman honored with epigrams. At the same time, as can be seen from all the above, she suffered the consequences of the superstition of her contemporaries, which are manifested in the exercise of extreme violence. The injuries to her body, if they were inflicted during life, betray horrific torture. If they were caused post-mortem, they constitute a grave dishonoring of the deceased body. The anthropological analysis of the bones cannot confirm which of the two occurred. Both, however, constitute acts of violence indicative of the dark side of the ancient world associated with strong prejudices, which, of course, are applied without distinction of gender and social class. While superstition led to violence and the deviant burial of the unfortunate woman, at the same time, the epigrams, and above all, the excellent Hieron, deify Niko and assign to her the honors of heroization corresponding to her high social status. In other words, the memory of a woman with a prominent position in the community is transferred from the hidden tomb and given a material dimension in the impressive Hieron, which would also house a statue of her in marble. This bipolar attitude towards the unfortunate woman illuminates an overlooked aspect of the world of late antiquity, within which a variety of religious practices flourished. At the same time, from the Hieron of Sikinos, there emerges a hitherto unknown, distinct female personality of the archipelago, Niko, who held the dominant position in the community of ancient Sikinos. Apart from this discovery, Episcopi offered a new perspective for the connection of medieval Hellenism with antiquity through architecture. Extensive interventions to provide for the Christian ritual needs had left their marks. At least two major medieval phases are indicated. The conversion of ancient monuments into churches by the Christians was, as we know, a common practice. In some cases, such as in Miletos and other megacities of Western Asia Minor, the Byzantines widely reused ancient buildings so that one may speak of a dominant spirit of antiquarianism. The reuse of funerary monuments as churches is far from unknown in the territories of the Byzantine Empire. It also occurs elsewhere in the Cyclades. In neighboring Thera, the church of St. Nicholas Marmaritis is a repurposed, flat-roofed, late Hellenistic building made of marble, possibly an above-ground tomb. Closer still is a conversion of a similar Chiron with a crypt into a church in Syria. In this context, Episcopi offers us another form of respect paid to the past, a new perspective achieved through architecture. The medieval phase of usage entailed a partial restoration, so initiating a diachronic appreciation of the aesthetics and spiritual value of the monument. The Christians chose a Chiron to transform it into a church. The quality of its construction and its size were important criteria in this decision. The uniqueness of the monument in the ancient building survivance on Sikinos also played a role. Another reason may be its location. The building is found outside the ancient city, in its necropolis. Churches were common on the outskirts of cities, especially when they had a cemetery use. In our case, however, there is no extensive use of the space for Christian burials. The first conversion of the Chiron into a church was accompanied by structural changes. To create the apse, the demolition of a large part of the eastern wall had to be carried out first. Side doors were opened, piercing the western wall of the nave. Marble partitions were put in place to form the sanctuary and perhaps to fashion aisles. The rearrangement fitted the functional needs of the clergy and the congregation. The spaces between the columns of the pronaos must have been sealed so that the church could acquire a narthex. This was done in a way that left the imposing columns visible. Parts of the chancel screen decorated with crosses are now built into the walls at points of later reconstructions. The bejeweled crosses portrayed and the character of the sculpted decoration give this a date, namely within the period of iconoclasm. The interventions required to convert the Chiron into a church disrupted its static integrity, and it went on to suffer significant destruction. The Roman vaulting and the Byzantine apse both collapsed along with the greater part of the eastern side, so causing damage to the southern side. The restoration that followed this destruction is of special interest. The building acquires a new vaulted structure. On its narrow sides, traces of a longitudinal barrel vault are found, which is narrower than the original internal width of the monument. The ancient pronaos, with its original flat-roofed covering also frescoed, was still in use as a narthex in the second Byzantine phase. From the remains of the Byzantine frescoes, we are able to restore the medieval arrangement, and the oversized full-length figures of St. Demetrios and St. Theodore Stratilatis are partially preserved on the west wall of the nave. Consequently, within the Roman cell, internal supports were added to bear a new cylindrical vault with a smaller radius than the original Roman one. The supports were wall pillars that were built in the interior of the ancient structure and in contact with the existing Roman cell. The wall pillars were placed to form a pair of arches in front of the north and south Roman walls. The Byzantine mason also narrowed the entrance to the nave to support the broken lintel of the ancient doorway. In this second medieval phase, the Roman monument is used as an external shell, and a new building is incorporated within its interior. This phase, though, almost completely vanished when Episcopi underwent another transformation in the 17th century. However, the entire eastern side, up to the trace of the lower vault, is part of this second phase. The row of bricks surrounding the arch of the eastern window finds parallels from the 7th to 8th centuries in Katapoliani on Paros, and is also reproduced in many Byzantine Cycladic monuments. Similarly, the construction of the front of the apsis conch with its voussoirs of alternating colors also recalls the Katapoliani tradition, which pattern is also copied in mid-Byzantine monuments. The reconstruction in the collapsed southeast corner extends down to the foundations and includes the buttress built of a piece with the foundations. On the south side, the Byzantine masons involved in fixing the ancient masonry using lime mortar and plugs. A similar rearrangement seems to have been undertaken with the displaced members of the ancient entablature. The reconstruction was effected with the help of plugs and mortar, as the ancient metal clamps that connected the members of the entablature had all fractured. Perhaps it was then that the south corner of the lost eastern pediment was relocated. In any case, the wall is fixed up with this ancient entablature, despite the apparent incompatibility of this element with the lower internal arrangement of the medieval vault. The preservation of the entablature obliged the medieval mason to seek solutions to practical issues. One such concerned the flow and drainage of rainwater caught between the boxed-in medieval vault and the higher ancient walls that were preventing its ready dispersal. It seems that the mason builder created strong inclines to direct the flow of water towards the east and free side of the structure. It is quite possible that the ancient frieze located beyond the southwestern end of the medieval vault was pierced through for the same reason. Thus, the architect of the second Christian phase came up with a solution that respected the integrity and beauty of the facades of the ancient building, which he even partially repaired. On the island, there existed or was called in a construction team that had the ability to implement such a complex solution to rebuild the church by modifying it within an existing ancient shell. At the same time, it turns out that the team also possessed the ability to restore dilapidated parts of the ancient monument. Whose inspiration was it to fix the parts of the Chiron, the teams or the founders? And finally, when did this intervention occur? As Sikinos is still unexplored archaeologically and the written sources are absent, there is a lack of evidence that would define the framework of the survival of this monument. Be that as it may, the idea that the smaller islands of the Cyclades were deserted or even abandoned is being overturned by our research day by day. The long duration of use of such a monument on Sikinos constitutes yet another irrefutable witness to the unbroken continuity of life during the Middle Ages on the small Cycladic islands. A third major reconstruction was carried out on the monument in the second half of the 17th century. According to a patriarchal seal of 1682, this phase can be associated with the foundation of a monastery in Episkopi that operated until 1830. Then the building acquired its current form, a domed crossing square plan. The additions to the roof are even later yet. The 17th century phase involved the demolition of the pre-existing church with its wall pillars and the semi-cylindrical vault. 4 corner piers were built to carry the vaulted structure. This, like the medieval one, is encased within the pre-existing Roman shell. The ancient flat-roofed pronos is still preserved, unchanged. Even in the post-Byzantine reconstruction, the continuing concern for preserving the ancient beauty of the monument is confirmed by the rearrangement or restoration of parts of the ancient entablature, especially in the eastern side. The wooden curved iconostasis of this period has been now restored and placed in its original position. But let us return to the second medieval phase. The architectural type of the single nave structure with a vaulted ceiling and arches, as well as its morphological elements, such as the alternating bichrome voussoirs of the apse or the surrounding projecting brickwork on the window, do not offer any narrower chronological framework. The fragments of Byzantine frescoes found within the foundation of the rebuilt southeast corner makes it possible that the medieval restoration was implemented during the 13th, 14th centuries. It should be noted that during this period, Sikinos, under Venetian rule, experienced great prosperity, as evidenced by the other 6 Byzantine fresco churches dating from this time. The construction of the chapel of Agia Anna, with its unique Byzantine drawings just north of our monument, confirms building activity in Episkopi during this period. The first phase of the chapel has been dated immediately after 1300s. If so, the collapse of the first Byzantine phase could perhaps be linked to the Rhodian earthquake of 1303, which was immediately followed by the reconstruction of Episkopi as well as of the building of Agia Anna. The construction of the latter, being physically set apart from the ancient monument, departs from the established rule in Cycladic architecture, ecclesiastical architecture, where the chapels are attached to the central church. This fact confirms the respect with which the founder and architect viewed the ancient Huron, as they deliberately left it all in open view. Near the castle of Chora stands the important Church of Christ the Savior. It is a single nave vaulted church with arches at the sides. The type and its dimensions suggest that it may have been a copy of the now lost medieval phase of Episkopi. The pair of founders, namely the rulers of the island, are depicted in a fresco. It is possible that they were connected to the great building program of Episkopi. Thus, in the exceptional medieval restoration of the Huron, we can observe not only the use of the ancient structure right down to our days, but also a concern to preserve its original form intact by applying unexpected solutions. The complex building sequence reveals a fixation with preserving the ancient form of the monument in every way, highlighting a particular sort of reverence for the past by the Byzantines of the archipelago. The reuse executed in the 8th century is in keeping with the tradition by the Byzantine for repurposing iconic ancient buildings for practical and symbolic reasons. As it was elsewhere in the empire, so too for the Cyclades. What is striking here is the determination during the second medieval phase, after the extensive collapses, that the reconstruction from the foundations up was adapted to leave intact the ancient shell and its component elements, such as the entablature or the facade with the columns, despite the obvious problems created by their incompatibility with the new building. The preservation of the ancient shell required technical skills beyond the ordinary and the norm for the Byzantines, especially in the low level of know-how the local Sykinos workshops possessed. The usual practice would have been to demolish the crumbling entablature that protruded above the Byzantine vault and to utilize its architectural members as decorative spolia in the new masonry. As is the case in many other examples. Here, though, the in situ preservation presupposes a special concern for the integrity of the ancient Hieron, incompatible with the usual construction attitudes of the Byzantines and which cannot be explained only by the recognition of the aesthetic values of the monument by the locals. For now, their action can be considered as motivated by more than respect for the ancestral past of their land. It was perhaps more a manifestation of atavistic ancestor worship. The present restoration of Episcopi on Sykinos is dedicated to preserving a monument that embodies Greek history of 2 millennia. Its cultural diversity, exceptionally manifested in the core of the monument, is a testimony of respect for the classical heritage and its integration into the medieval tradition. The monument states with clarity the need of the people to constantly connect their present with their past. A sacred landmark it is, at the same time, a nucleus of ancestral pride. The restoration of Episcopi was achieved with the 2022 European Heritage Award, Europa Nostra Award, funded by the EU Creative Europe program. In September 2022, in the presence of the President of the Hellenic Republic, the people of Sykinos welcomed with enthusiasm and with a great celebration the completion of the works, the opening of the monument to the public, and the revival of its religious use. The Ephorate of Antiquities of the Cyclades has bestowed upon the Sykinians a material expression of their identity, as well as a valuable resource that will contribute to the sustainable touristic development and therefore to the survival of the small island community. Apart from the obvious result of saving a significant monument from collapse, the restoration and the remarkable discoveries and dissemination of the relevant information have drawn attention to Episcopi and thus to Sykinos. The monument's outstanding value and uniqueness, enhanced by the project, have already attracted visitors' interest. We see some images from the monument after the restoration. The project promotes cultural and ecological tourism on an island which relies on it for its own sustainable economic development. This approach is essential for secluded communities. Sykinos has no more than 300 inhabitants. It is part of an effort to prevent the desertion of small islands, which, as ever, form a vital part of Greece's identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Athanasoulis. That was a very interesting and a very fascinating presentation. And now I would like to, it's my honor to invite Professor Judith Herring, a distinguished Byzantinist, a patron of Gakuk, and a dear friend of the late Matti Egon, to give the vote of thanks. Professor Herring, the floor is yours.
Well, what a wonderful tour of a magnificent island, unknown and very little documented, and now given a full history in one monument. What more wonderful lecture could we have imagined? Thank you so much. Of course, being very interested in the Byzantine era, I was particularly thrilled to see how, over the centuries, this small monument has been cherished and has not been wrecked by a removal of ancient members and large bits of useful building material for other purposes, for other people's houses, for other people's castles. The Venetians were very good at pillaging other churches in order to build their castles, but not here. And I do think that it is a very, very curious story that Dr. Athanasoulis has told us. Very, very curious. Here is a monument to the dead who were not Christian. They lived on the island in ancient times. And the monument is like many other tomb temples. And we're very familiar with the conversion of temples and tomb temples into Christian monuments. I was thinking of the wonderful cathedral at Spoleto, where again, the exterior facade has been preserved, although the interior is entirely Christianized and transformed for a different religious purpose. But it seems to me that here at Episcopi, we have a quite outstanding example of respect for the dead, of a different era, of a different belief, of a different period altogether from the medieval period when the Christian transformation was effected, well, in the early period, 6th century perhaps. And then again, later, as the church was refashioned from within, always preserving the exterior form. And then the building of the little chapel alongside, not connected to the temple tomb, but separate. That's another mark of great respect, not to invade the space which has already been declared holy by people who had no immediate empathy with the 3rd century Roman inhabitants. It's such a fascinating story. And I must come back to this extraordinary contradiction in the discovery of a sealed tomb intermediate between the crypt where other burials were and the floor surface of the temple tomb, intermediate and sealed, but at the same time as the Roman floor slabs were laid. And then the inhabitant of the tomb, no mere ordinary lady, this. Nico is joining the great women of the past, and her soul is with the immortals. But she has been miserably, violently attacked, whether before or after her death. And it is a very extraordinary story, very contradictory. I don't quite understand how the great respect for the dead, which is represented by her fantastic burial and these grave goods and her jewelry and her element, the things that mark her as a woman of importance and status, how this is to be realized as an integral part of the violence directed to her skeleton or to her body before it was buried. However, it is a quite wonderful story, and I would like you to join me in making a very, very strong vote of thanks to our speaker. Thank you so much for this fascinating lecture.
Thank you, Judith. That was a marvelous vote of thanks. An excellent summary, made many things clear to all of us. A heartfelt thanks to those who joined us this evening and to those who followed us online. Anyone who is interested in GACUC's aims and activities, please visit our website or and follow our social media. You can also watch past lectures and even the current ones and the one today on our YouTube channel. And if you wish to support us, please go to membership donation sections of our website. All the information is here. And now please join us for drinks and nibbles and get to meet our speaker. Thank you for coming and a very happy Christmas to you all. Thank you.